Hello to all friends, welcome to Cinema Crave. Today we're going to take a look at a film whose dialogues make us think and offer us important life lessons. We're going to talk about fear and the impact it has on our lives, those same walls that all of us build around ourselves, because inside those walls we feel comfortable and we have no desire to step outside our comfort zone. And we're going to see how beliefs that may have formed for us, even at a very young age, are now in adulthood controlling our lives without us even realizing it. The film we're talking about is the film Good Will Hunting, in which Robin Williams plays the role of a psychoanalyst who guides a rebellious young man back to his senses through his words. And in this film, several very deep monologues take place between the characters, especially one by the lake, which is considered one of the most famous monologues in the history of cinema. And it will be interesting for you to know that this film is made based on the principles of psychoanalysis. Every single character is in the story for a reason, and each of them has an important psychological influence on our protagonist. To watch this video, you don't need to remember the film at all, or even have seen it. Having a general idea about it is enough. The film is about a genius boy who doesn't know how to live. He has a very rebellious personality until he starts talking with the psychoanalyst played by Robin Williams, and this person teaches him the ways of living. And this becomes the message of the story, as if the psychoanalyst is teaching us, the viewers, the ways of living. And the important point here is that this film won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay. And I'm giving you a spoiler warning for the film Good Will Hunting, and let's get into it. You know how some people say 4 words and 3 of them are jabs at others? Or, for example, they're always mocking people, constantly belittling those around them, to the point that others can hardly tolerate them. The interesting point this film shows very well is that, in fact, these people feel intense fear and insecurity in their lives, and our protagonist is exactly like this. Or, for example, many of us may have experienced in our personal lives that we know something is really good for us, but we don't have the courage to do it. We feel bad at the thought of doing it, as if we feel bad about being happy. Or maybe we see a very strange behavior in someone around us, which in psychology is called self-destruction, people who ruin their own lives with their own hands. Meaning when an opportunity appears right in front of them, they shoot themselves in the foot. Good Will Hunting is about such a boy, he can solve math problems in the blink of an eye, problems that mathematical geniuses spend years working on. But Will has been deeply wounded in life, and in the film his wounds are shown in an exaggerated way. Because in cinema, everything is shown exaggerated. A person doesn't need to have such deep wounds. Much simpler wounds also affect our lives. Will was abused by his father, and he had even been thrown out of the house several times. He was forced to live in other people's homes, and eventually everyone kicked him out, and at a very young age, he ended up in an orphanage. Meaning Will suffered a lot of harm during his childhood, and these harms were not only physical, they left far deeper wounds on his psyche. So what are these wounds? When someone is harmed like this in childhood, a wrong belief forms for them, because as a child he needed affection, and when these things happened to him, he came to believe that if he wants to rely on someone's love or become too close to someone, that person will eventually hurt him. So in his mind, closeness becomes equal to suffering. As a result, he doesn't get close to anyone in his life. The language of these people becomes extremely sharp. They do everything they can to offend others and push them away. Their brain wants to protect them this way. It doesn't want to allow them to become close to someone and end up being hurt by them. Childhood wounds can become even worse. If someone has experienced a lot of humiliation during childhood or has been harshly punished for very ordinary mistakes, another belief forms for them, the fear of failure. The fear that if they step out of the safe zone they're in, they might make one small mistake that will end in tremendous pain and suffering. As a result, even though the person might be a genius, he doesn't want to find a good job for himself. He always hangs out with his low-level friends, the same place where he feels safe. Now, why does he hang out with these kinds of people? Because his friends are people who have no expectations of him, and since he lives at the lowest level of society, no mistake happens there that someone would eventually want to blame him for. And he comes to believe that if he does nothing, then he also won't fail. And this is how these people are afraid of being happy. They don't dare to take advantage of the opportunities in their lives. As a result, our protagonist's life is completely unstable. He doesn't even do regular labor work. One week he is a construction worker, the next week he becomes a janitor. He is not consistent in any job. And it gets even worse. He doesn't have the courage to express his feelings to the girl he likes and build a close relationship with her. When his girlfriend expresses her feelings for him, he suddenly starts an absurd argument. He makes an issue out of something that doesn't make sense, starts a fight, breaks the heart of the girl who loved him, and runs away from there. This is a clear example of someone who feels fear in his life, and that fear is controlling his life. And the story reaches the point where this rebellious character starts talking with a psychoanalyst. This psychoanalyst knows exactly what this fear is. He knows that the sharp tongue this boy has, or the clownish behavior he shows, are all his defense mechanisms. For example, the first time they take him to this psychoanalyst, he keeps showing an indifferent attitude, as if he has come to a worthless place, or he uses other defense mechanisms. He starts mocking things. For example, he says, "There are so many books here. Did you buy them in bulk?" But the psychoanalyst knew this and gave Will the opportunity to talk. In some sessions, the entire time passed in silence because Will wasn't willing to speak. Even Will's defense mechanisms made the psychoanalyst angry. When this guy saw that no matter what he did, the psychoanalyst wouldn't lose his temper and he couldn't break the relationship with him, he officially began attacking and started mocking the psychoanalyst's deceased wife. He goes to the painting that the psychoanalyst's wife had made and starts mocking it. And his plan works, the psychoanalyst loses his temper, the session falls apart, and Will is happy about it. Why? Because without even knowing it himself, his fear of intimacy kept him from forming a proper relationship with anyone. Right after this incident, the psychoanalyst sets up another session with the boy, this time by the lake, and one of the strongest monologues in the history of cinema happens. And this is the monologue that is supposed to make us think. The boy's fear has been discovered by the psychologist. The psychoanalyst tells him, "I figured out what your problem is. You are a scared kid. You act like a strong person on the outside, but deep down, you're nothing but a frightened boy."
If I asked you about art, you'd probably give me the skinny on every art book ever written. Michelangelo, I know a lot about him. Life's work, political aspirations, him and the Pope, sexual orientation, the whole works, right? I bet you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel. You've never actually stood there and looked up at that beautiful ceiling. If I ask you about women, you'd probably give me a soda, say your personal favorites. You may have even been laid a few times. But you can't tell me what it feels like to wake up next to a woman and feel truly happy.
And while he is saying these words, if you pay attention, at the beginning of the monologue, we only see the psychoanalyst's face. And the more he talks, the camera slowly zooms out until Will also appears in the frame. This shows that slowly, gradually, the boy is starting to understand something. And here the psychoanalyst tells him something very important. He says, this fear you have has had a major effect on your life, so much so that you don't even know what you want. And this is an important message in the story. Those who do not know what they want from life have many deep fears. And the psychoanalyst's words keep going on like this. Again, in the next session, another series of interesting monologues happen when the psychoanalyst, in order to start a conversation with Will, begins talking about a baseball game because Will also liked baseball. He says something that Will couldn't believe. He said, "When I was young, I had a ticket to a very valuable final match, an absolutely legendary game. I could have gone to the stadium and watched it up close. A ticket that was so rare you had to sleep in front of the stadium for days to be able to buy it." Then they start describing the entire game with excitement, saying things like, "This player threw the ball, that one passed it, the other one hit the shot," and then they gain that point. They reviewed the entire legendary game together. And eventually, Will asked, "How do you feel knowing you witnessed such an important historical moment in person?" And here, the psychoanalyst says something interesting.
Did you rush the field? No, I didn't rush the fucking field. I wasn't there. What? No, I was in a bar having a drink with my future wife.
What was he trying to tell Will? Will was always afraid of making mistakes, and because of that, he didn't have the courage to take important steps in his life. Even though he was a genius, He wasn't willing to take a risk and accept a good job. The reason was the punishments he had endured during childhood. Here, the psychoanalyst told this story to make him understand that living is worth taking risks. Even if you don't succeed, it's perfectly fine. He said, "I could have gone that day and watched that final up close, but I decided to take a risk and go have a drink with a girl with whom I might have ended up happy. But it was still worth the risk. Even if I had failed, I still wouldn't have been upset." In the story the psychoanalyst is telling, both the baseball game and the girl in the story are metaphors for life itself and the opportunities that appear on our path. That girl was a metaphor for the chance to have a better life. He had that ticket in his hand, but maybe he could have something even better in life, and he took a risk for it. And the climax of the story is exactly here, when the psychoanalyst reveals that he went to juvenile detention and found Will's childhood file, something Will didn't know the psychoanalyst was aware of. The severe wounds on Will's body were visible, wounds from his father's beatings or injuries from fights in the orphanage. The psychoanalyst said this on purpose, because now was the time for Will to break free from all that false safety and the fears he had built around himself. Here, the psychoanalyst says a very simple sentence that once again can make us think. His sentence is very simple. He just kept saying, "It's not your fault." What does this mean? Children, whenever they are treated badly, always think something, "I must have been bad for this to happen," or "if I were a better child, these things wouldn't have happened." This is a belief that forms in childhood, but even in adulthood, it keeps repeating in our minds. That's why Sean, the psychoanalyst, repeated again and again, "It wasn't your fault." What he meant was, you were beaten, you were rejected, your life was full of pain, none of that was related to you. You had no control over the circumstances. Now pay attention to the acting of the person opposite him, how intelligent it is. It is completely based on Will's psychology. Just as he was used to, he first puts on a mask based on his own defense mechanism. The first mask is indifference. When he hears, "It's not your fault," he says, "Yeah, man, I know." When the sentence is repeated again, this time he switches to clowning. He starts mocking and laughing. Again, when the psychoanalyst repeats the sentence, this time Will becomes angry and tries to do the same thing he did with his girlfriend when he fought with her. He tries to use the same defense mechanism and push the psychoanalyst away from himself. But when for the fourth time the psychoanalyst tells him, "It's not your fault," this is where finally the wall of his false beliefs collapses. And interestingly, Robin Williams explained this scene by saying that in this moment, two lonely souls found each other and became father and son. Here, the psychoanalyst fills exactly the place of a father that Will never had in his life. After this scene, Will takes the car he got from his friends, which is also an important metaphor in the story. Will's friends played a very important role in his life. One of the reasons Will agreed to listen to the psychoanalyst was that he once had a conversation with one of his friends. One of his friends, who had very high emotional intelligence, once told Will, "If 20 years from now you're still living in this neighborhood, I swear I'll kill you. Because you won the lottery, that's your intelligence, but you're so afraid that you don't have the courage to cash it in." Then his friends buy him a car and give it to him as a gift, and Will gets in that car and leaves town, something he never had the courage to do before. Where is he going? He's going to the same girl whose heart he broke. But the film never shows us what happened, whether he found the girl or not, whether he managed to see her, whether she forgave him or didn't, whether they got together or not. And if you were looking for that answer, it means you didn't understand the message of the film. We only see Will leaving. Why? Because living is worth taking risks. It doesn't matter whether things turn out well or not, whether the girl forgave him or not. What mattered was that Will found the courage to start this journey. And one of the most important lines the psychoanalyst tells Will is that people must be the players of their own life, even if in the end it leads to losing. Because taking risks is exactly the main part of living. Things not going well does not mean we have failed. Real failure is when we regret the attempts we never made. And the ending of the film asks us to reflect. But reflect on what? On the walls each of us has built around our lives. What walls? Exactly the routine that all of us have in our lives. The routine we do every single day, the space where our mind feels comfortable, and the discomfort we feel at the idea of stepping outside of these habits. The film asks us to sit down and think about it. Let's see how many of these habits and routines we have in our lives are actually formed by our own fears. We have built these walls around ourselves with thousands of excuses, just like all the things Will said throughout the entire film, the excuses he made to push his girlfriend away, to stay in that unstable life at the lowest level of work, to avoid studying, and to remain in the terrible environment he lived in. Each of us is supposed to think about how many of the excuses we make are actually walls we have built around ourselves because we don't have the courage to see what is on the other side of them. Well, friends, this was today's video. It would be great if you go and watch the film again, especially those who watched it 20 years ago. This time you'll watch it with a new perspective. If it truly made you think, don't forget to like the video. We can release many more videos like this on the channel. The film Forrest Gump, with its ending, especially the scene with the feather, which was a metaphor for life, or the film Dead Poets Society with that painful letter found in the story, or the film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where Kate Winslet's hair color kept changing. All of these are messages and dialogues that make us think. And until another deep dive into these films, goodbye.